And joining us for more on tonight's topic is Captain Bill Chase of the Sarasota Sportsmen Association, ABC 7 meteorologist Bob Harrigan, the resident fisherman here at ABC 7, and reporter Max Winnitz, who is also a pretty good fisherman from what I understand. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. And this is what I don't get. If the government is saying that red snapper still needs to be protected, but local fishermen say, boy, there's more than you could literally shake a stick out there, where is the disconnect, Captain?
I think they're using antiquated or skewed scientific data. I think there's too much pressure on the recreational fishermen as by the commercial fishermen. I mean, we have a 10-day season, and they can fish up to however many, 80, 100,000 pounds of quota.
So you're essentially saying this is politics, not science.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, they allow us to fish up to 9 miles for an extended period of time, but there's no red snapper inside of 9 miles that could qualify for the 16-inch limit. They might as well tell us we could go catch zebras. I mean...
Right. And so, Bob, when you go out there, from what I understand, it's harder to get grouper because there's so many, red snappers in the way.
And that's always been a big issue with the fisheries and the slot limits and how much you can catch and what size you can catch and what you have to toss back in. I've been out with Bill a couple of times, and obviously you got to go way offshore to catch these American red snapper. And when it comes to these fish, even juvenile, you talk about Goliath groupers. There's some talk about that with captains too. That when you pull up the juveniles, the Goliath grab them, and so they're gone. So there's all sorts of problems with the science, I think, when it comes down to American reds and other fisheries too, and other fish species, and how they're controlled. Now, I want to make one point. I did talk and just got off the phone with a pretty good captain here that everyone knows, Captain Scott. Captain Scott says that he has never seen in the world where a fishery has been protected by slot limits be depleted down to a problem where they're extinct. So he suggests put a slot limit maybe for the recreational guys to go out and catch American red snapper. And as long as there's a slot limit, there'll always be plenty of these American reds.
Max, who's making these decisions?
Well, it's NOAA when it comes to the federal waters, which is everything past 9 miles, and then it's FWC when it comes to everything between the coast and 9 miles. So the decisions are coming down to the state and federal government.
And Captain, I mean, the NOAA is renowned for what it does, and it's hard to imagine that politics and commercial fishing is going to influence their decision making. But you can't find any other reason why the limits for private anglers are what they are.
No, there's been, with the National Marine Fisheries Service, they have people on the board that make these decisions that either own or have an interest in commercial fishing operations. So it's skewed. It's kind of like the fox guarding the hen house. We're limited to 10 days. Why can't they give us 5 weekends in a row so that the recreational people can actually get out there? Most of us are working to be a commercial or a charter guy. You need to make 50% of your income or more from catching fish.
And that's a good point, too, he brings up. I wanted to say that I also talked to Captain. He said, we have a tropical system coming up into the Gulf on Monday and Tuesday, and possibly Wednesday. That shuts out 3 of the 9 days of fishing right there because no one's going to go offshore when there's a tropical low around. So, again, the weekend thing seems like a pretty good idea to me.
In cases like that, does the limit extend?
No. No, it's that window. And that's all they allow. They don't allow for weather, which I think the longliners complained about in the past, and they don't allow for if you were sick or you had to work or, that's the day and it's tough if you can't go.
Max, what is the precedence for this? Does NOAA do this with other species?
That's a better question for these guys here, but there are, from my understanding, there are restrictions on plenty of other fish. Bob mentioned there are so many different types of groupers, and I believe there are restrictions on certain types of groupers, or grouper, I should say, but there are restrictions. But red snapper is just such a sought-after fish that people enjoy eating and enjoy catching. There's a nice fight involved with it, so it upsets a lot of anglers, and I talked to them for this story. And to kind of touch on something else Bob said, Jay Lucas, who was our commercial angler that we spoke to, he said when he's trying to catch grouper, his bait can't get all the way to the bottom where the grouper are because the red snapper are taking it right away.
That's what I said earlier. You can't get a bait past a grouper or past a snapper to catch a grouper. Years ago, we had no red snapper, and now they're all over the place.
And where does commercial fishermen figure into this? And what I'm thinking about is I used to work up in the Northeast, and I know they closed the Outer Banks for a certain kind of fish, which really put a lot of people flat out of business.
And I want to say this too, Alan. The Atlantic Ocean, the southern Atlantic, that's closed off completely to red snapper fishing. Nobody can fish for red snapper in the southern Atlantic.
And before, I know we're pressed for time. Coastal Conservation Association that kind of looks out for the recreational angler as well as some of the boat captains. They are also suggesting that these restrictions are putting a big burden on them. On top of that, they have to pay a lot of money to get a license to catch these fish, up to $20,000
for a reef permit.
A reef permit just to go out there and catch these fish. And the science, according to the captains, and I talked to Captain Johnny Walker and Captain Scott Moore, they both said the science isn't there yet to really determine how many red snapper are out there. It's just flawed as far as that goes.
Do any of you know of any organized effort to appeal to NOAA or the government to change this?
Coastal Conservation does have I don't know if you call it a political action committee, but they've got a group that constantly gets in front of the Senate in different states. They tried to have a coalition to let the Gulf coastal states regulate the red snapper season. The Fed said no. So it's a political and it's a financial game that and we don't seem to be winning.
That was going to be my next question. Have you ever been successful before in terms of changing the federal regulations in terms of fishing?
The Coastal Conservation Association, yeah, they've made some strides, obviously, in different kinds of species of fish. And they do a great job with the snook protection. I know they look for redfish too, and they look at the sciences there. They work hand in hand with the marine scientists to get a better determination as to how the population is doing. But that's near shore. I think it's difficult to get a real good indication as to how many snappers are out there other than just talking to captains. Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Well, how do they go about doing that?
It's a good question.
I think from what I understand, what I've learned is that they ask the captains when they come back to shore how many they caught, what was the frequency that they caught them.
From my understanding, the last survey that NOAA did was back in 2013. So it's been 3 years since the last population survey was completed, so it's outdated.
And Captain, we have just less than a minute left, but who, when you come back to the docks, who is looking to make sure that you're following the rules?
No one. I've been stopped once. They checked my catch. I understand that they do hang around the docks and things, but there's no official weigh-in station or any place that we can go register that they could get the data from us. Right. We do have a reef permit or a reef survey now, but I don't think very many people are following the law.
And we'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight.